friends, family, and friends we have yet to meet and who have yet to become family. Welcome to an episode. I almost said another episode. Is it appropriate to say another episode, Cam, on this one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, to another episode of the Soul and Society podcast. Now, I see some startled looks on the faces in the room, and I'll explain that in just a moment, okay? I'm your host, Osahano Bazwaye, joined here by my favoritist at this point. I say favoritist because I have little ones, and they just love adding extra endings to everything. So favoritist co-host.
Wow, thank you.
The one, the only, Cameron Shepard Byenberg Sr. How you doing today?
I just found out that I have a child that's a junior, so I'm a bit shocked right now.
Maybe I'm just prophesying your junior. That's all.
Wow.
Prophesying the junior.
Well, there are prophetic words and there are pathetic words, and you know.
Only time will tell which one this is.
It's true. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. How are you doing?
I am here. I'm here, aren't I?
I'm here, aren't I?
No, I'm good. I am almost overly caffeinated. But overly caffeinated for me means by this time of the day, in case you folks are wondering, we're recording this at like 7 o'clock at night. By this time in the day, I am like baseline caffeinated for most people. So bless my heart, and let's see how this goes. Here, we also have a guest. This is our third guest?
Yeah.
Yes, it's our third guest and our first woman. And you guys do not know how hard we have been fighting to get a woman with us. So we're excited to have our friend and soon to be your friend, the Kristen Caloca.
I'm really the first woman?
Yeah.
That's okay.
You are.
I feel very honored. I feel like I have to represent well, so here we go.
I feel like you're doing a great job already. So.
Already.
Just by
You're
sitting
here. You're here, but you are not just here to be here. Trust me, as this episode goes on, you guys will understand why we have Kristen here.
Yeah.
Excited for it. Oh, yes. The wonderful statement that brought startled looks. Soul and Society. If you've been tuned in with us for a while now, you would know that we were the Commission Church podcast at one point. So here's the lore. You ready for some lore? Here we go. When Cam first approached me about doing this podcast many moons ago, the original thought was triggered to him, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. Original thought was triggered to him about this name, Soul and Society. The first time I actually had the opportunity to speak here at Commission, I made a statement. It was actually it's actually a quote by one of my favorite pastors, thinkers, and theologians, the great Tyler Burns. And Tyler makes this statement in relation to the current moment of deconstruction that we see happening in the church. His church tends to have a lot of young adults and folks who are navigating deconstruction. And one of the great issues that he hears is, well, the church seems like it doesn't care about our world, like it doesn't care about our community. And so the statement that Tyler makes is this, is that the gospel is not just good for the salvation of the soul, but also for the transformation of society.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's just a great summation of the richness of the gospel. And so I mentioned that during the sermon, and Cam pulled me aside and was like, hey, we need to do a podcast. And that needs to be the title, Soul and Society. Yeah. And we forgot about it when we started the podcast. And so recently, as I was thinking about just we were doing some strategic planning, I was like, hey, we should bring back the Soul and Society name. Let's run with it. And as it so happens, this episode is the perfect entry point for that, based on the conversation we'll be having with our friend and your friend, Kristen. All that being said, welcome to the Soul and Society podcast, where we talk about all things related to, yes, the salvation of our soul and the beauty of the gospel that brings transformation to the world and to the society around us.
Amen.
If you are uninitiated or have never heard an episode of this podcast, here's how we like to roll. Hot take, church take. I'm sorry, fun take, hot take, church take, takeaways, and lastly, Q&A. As you can tell, we love some alliteration and some rhyming around here. So, let's talk a good fun take. You guys ready for a fun take?
So ready?
Wait, quick question. Will there be merch?
The Q&A is at the...
Okay, sorry. All right.
I'm kidding.
Okay. We can come back to it.
That'd be amazing.
Short answer is there will be merch if you can find a donor for us, Kristen.
Okay, that might be my business, so we can talk after.
Well, then, yes,
find a
Kristen, we'll have
donor.
merch.
I'll be
We
your
can
first
find a donor.
sponsor.
We've been looking for sponsors.
All right.
So
A sponsor, if we had $1 for every time Osahana said the statement, brought to you by a sponsor that will be named at a later date, we would have enough to have merch by this point. So
my hope is
right.
that Ghost Energy Drink will sponsor us.
in Jesus' name.
Jesus' name. Okay,
Yes.
fun take.
Fun take.
This fun take, I'm excited for this one. Here's our fun take for both of you and those listening in the audience and at home. What fictional character or fictional family would you like to have as your neighbor?
This is a good one. I already know.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, so I was thinking about this earlier. A child of the 80s and 90s, so who remembers TGIF?
Yeah.
Does
All day.
anyone? Am I
All day.
dating myself? Okay, we got two
You
double
haven't dated
arms
yourself.
raised.
You're a child of the
yes, and
1900s.
Christina too. Okay, so what were the iconic families on TGIF?
Family Matters, Full House.
Yes, those were my two.
Wow.
Look at that.
Right there, right?
On either side, just
Wow.
the Winslows
And
Yes.
the Tanners.
and the
And
Tanners.
the Tanners.
Wow.
Are you okay with Steve Urkel just coming through your house?
Yes, because even though he was annoying, he made life interesting, right? And like, who wouldn't want,
Valid.
I don't know, there's something that I really appreciate, or it says a lot about a family who keeps their door open for an annoying neighbor,
Ooh, that'll preach.
right? Like,
It's true.
that's a family I want to live next to.
Yeah.
Very welcoming, hospitable, accept you as you are,
Yeah,
good neighbor.
I like it.
it's true.
I like it.
It's true.
Cam?
You know, I've been thinking about this, and I'm gonna go a different route than real human beings, and I'll go with an animated series.
Cam,
And
please don't take mine. Ooh, I'm not sure if you take mine. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with the Flanders family from The Simpsons, because I really would love to sit with Ned Flanders, who is probably the kindest human being on the face of the earth. I could maybe deal with that without some of the other family members, but I would just really love to have Ned Flanders as a neighbor. He's just the kindest person. He'd be a great resource to have. There's also episodes where he like saves them from fires and is like prepared, and throughout the whole series he loves the Lord, and so that's who I'd go with.
Did he take your...
No, that is so. That's
you have a
like-
look of disappointment right now
I'm
for people that
disappointed.
can't
I am
see it.
disappointed.
His
Ned
Who
face.
are you hoping I was gonna go with?
I don't know, someone superhero affiliated. I don't know, like Bruce Wayne or something. You know, just
You took all of the energy right out of that.
I did.
So
I did. That was a
can't get
total
past the
buzzkill
disappointment.
right there. Yeah.
jeez, little- whew. Okay.
You're welcome, I guess. Bring us back to life. Oh,
Yeah,
please.
it's gonna, you know. I'm actually gonna go, and maybe this is just because of the age of life I'm in, the stage of life I'm in. I'm going to go with the Healer family from Bluey.
We're just sticking with Bluey every episode.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. They listen. Chili and Bandit can babysit my kids all day.
It's true.
Now, if they can survive my kids, because my kids are little terrorists, so if they can survive,
Well, they have muffins, so
It's true.
that's true. They can survive Muffin. I'm gonna be honest. Muffin frustrates me in a very real way. Like
you can turn this into a hot takes on Bluey episodes.
Oh, hot
podcast.
take is Muffin's parents have done gentle parenting very poorly.
they've done stereotypical gentle parenting.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah,
they've
they
done.
put the gentle in gentle parenting. Yes.
Oh man, every time I see Muffin come on the screen, I have to like leave the room. It gets me there. That's where it takes me. That's where it takes me.
But then you want to be neighbors with the Healer.
The Healers. Now, I guess I'll have to take the Winslow approach, and if Muffin comes over, Muffin comes over.
Yeah, you just have to leave the house.
Let him in. No, you let him in.
You know who you
welcome
wouldn't
them.
leave the house for? Ned Flanders.
I might actually. Ned annoys me. I'll just be honest. Ned annoys me.
That's totally fair. You're totally wrong.
I just want to shave Ned's mustache every time I see him.
He does. Okay. Ted Lasso vibes.
Yes, 100%.
I mean, minus some things, but
yeah, a lot of things. Yeah. No, I mean, Ted Lasso would be a wonderful neighbor too.
Oh, Ted absolutely would.
I would like Ted Lasso as a neighbor.
Yeah.
For sure.
Maybe minus Coach Beard, but
oh no,
no,
definitely Coach Beard.
They're a pair. They're a pair.
I mean, I guess you get the whole. I guess you get the whole AFC Richmond,
the whole situation,
which would be fun.
We're here for it. We're here for it. Yeah. Wow. Okay. 2 cartoon families and 2. Okay, this is good. This is good. Our guests have given us some great answers for these hot takes.
They so have. Yeah.
We're off to a good start.
We're off to a good start.
I'm feeling warmed up.
You're warmed up, ready to go? Cool. Let's dive into the deep end. All right.
Hot take.
Hot take. I don't even know if it's a hot take, but let's start with just you, Kristen, because why in the world do we have you up here? Kristen, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what excites you about life. I don't know, humanize yourself for us.
Hot take, who am I? Who am I? I mean, that is the question, right? Very existential. I am a wife and a mother, a daughter and a sister. I try to be a good friend. That's something that has been a lot more top of mind for me as I've gotten older. I'm a business owner. I am a board member. I am what else? I don't know. Yeah, that probably pretty much sums it up, the different hats that I wear.
Yeah.
So I started a business a couple months ago. I'm an entrepreneur. I identify as an entrepreneur in addition to a business owner. And I've done consulting for a couple of decades now and decided felt really called to kind of use those talents and experiences for good. If you know anything about the consulting world, it's a phenomenal industry to get into if you really love money and want to make a lot of money.
This is true.
That's not why I got into it. I kind of fell into it. Made really good money I never thought I would ever make. And, it was not fulfilling at the end of the day and left me feeling really at odds with values and things. Sure. And so, the last 4 or 5 years has been a journey of me really centering the Lord and what He's calling me to, how He's calling me to use my time, my treasure, and my talents in terms of my professional trajectory.
Right.
And that's been a very transformational, very different experience for me.
Sure.
That kind of is what led me to some of the ideas I threw out on the things that we could talk about in terms of what I do in my day-to-day job and how I see that overlapping with the role of the church and what that means for us, what that means for society, what that means for us as believers. So I don't know if that's a hot take, but that's about me.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So,
what is the name of your business and what does your business do?
So we rebranded because when I started, I didn't have any good names in mind. It was kind of a sudden transition because I decided to resign from a nonprofit that I was working at. And we rebranded earlier this year and we're called Kairos Impact Strategies. So if you know anything about that word, there's a spiritual meaning behind it. But it also represents like a particular moment or like a milestone moment in time. And that very much connects with me in terms of how I enter the picture as a consultant. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients or they approach me, it's because something has happened. And you can look at that opportunity and you can leverage it as an opportunity, or you can let the thing happen to you. One is strategic, the other is not, right? And that's kind of what differentiates me as a consultant. So I work with nonprofits, I work with government agencies, local government. I work with foundations. I don't work with private business anymore. We'll see if that ever comes up again. Sure. But and I work with them on a variety of things. So it can be leadership development, team development, strategic planning, strategic communications, issues management, crisis mitigation, narrative change, I don't know, lots of things that fall within the spaces in between those major pillars. So I'm not a consultant that you hire if you need like a newsletter. And that hence the name, why the name kind of felt like a real differentiator to also, explain what we do and why it matters.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe the Kairos will come up for you to do private business again. That was a terrible joke. Kristen, because you mentioned timing, side note, and this is just, you're not paying me to say this, I'm just saying this.
Yeah.
I have sat in on Kristen doing presentation and training and things of that nature. If you were a nonprofit out there or any of the types of organizations that she mentioned, highly advised, get in touch with Kristen. Get in touch.
Thanks.
She's excellent at what she does.
Yeah.
I've been in the nonprofit space for way too long, and I've seen all kinds of trainers and consultants. I do training and consulting myself. I'm not advocating for myself. I'm advocating for Kristen over here because she does a phenomenal job. So yeah, if you need any of those services, or if you think you might, or even if you're just thinking, contact Kristen, please. Contact
And
Kristen.
by the way, I try to provide a lot of free resources. So just know that, like, again, my heart in this is to do what God has called me to do. And the business model that I have is set up to meet people where they're at with whatever budget or non-existent budget they have. So if I can point you towards free resources or free workshops that I do that are made possible by funders, by philanthropy, I love doing that too. So
I have some of those free resources myself, and they are wonderful. Okay, just take advantage. Take advantage. But you mentioned this thing around timing, right? And one of the first times, actually, I heard you give any sort of commentary within the four walls of Commission Church was around timing. This cultural moment we live in, and it was this statement that I found is resonating and is resonating.
I have to acknowledge that my phone alarm is going off right now.
Yeah.
I can't keep
Speaking of
listening to
timing.
you and just know that I'm frantically trying to turn off my phone
Speaking of
alarm.
timing, that's okay.
So, sorry, hold on one moment, please. Okay, we're good. Keep going.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Real life. Okay.
The statement you made, which was actually a statement that was fresh on my brain at that moment, because a thinker and theologian that I appreciate, Dr. Eric Mason, had just released a book around this idea. Is you made this statement, you were doing our generosity moment that morning, and he said, the church has a branding problem. The Big C Church has a branding problem.
Fact, yeah.
Care to
I would say
explain?
fact.
Care to explain?
Challenge me on it?
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not challenged. I'd actually like to know where you're coming from with that, because I think it is an interesting statement that needs exploration, and I think there's some people who would say, that's just the talk of people who lack faith, or that's just the talk of people who haven't really experienced God. Yeah, where does that statement resonate or land with you?
Yeah. It's like, where to begin, right?
At the beginning.
All right. So something to know about me, and like maybe where I'm coming from when I say that.
Yeah.
I accepted Jesus into my heart, I think when I was 8. Grew up going to church in many ways. Had a lot of really big doubts as a teenager, and ultimately walked away. Returned in my early 20s, and what I kind of learned upon return was that it was okay to be a skeptic. And I still feel that way. I very much identify as a believer, and I identify as a skeptic. And if you know anything about Rachel Held Evans, and you maybe have different opinions about her, that's okay. But one of the things she said that just resonates so true with me is, when she would begin to teach, she would say, on the days when I believe, and I just yeah, that's me. On the days when I believe, like, God help me in my unbelief. I believe so much most of the time, and yet that is what faith is, right? And I've become a lot more comfortable with that tension. The older that I've gotten, the stronger my relationship with the Lord has gotten, because it's more rooted in what he thinks of me versus a fear of what other people will think of me. And so I think, and I feel like a skeptic a lot of the time. I am, and I've always kind of felt like an outsider in the church. I don't usually feel like I belong. I don't feel like I belong in a lot of spaces, just to be honest. I think I'm kind of naturally awkward, and that might be why. But when I think of all these things, and then I think of the church, and I think of, like, why do I show up to church? Because I'm like the last person I would expect to show up to church. There are days where I don't believe, or there are days where I'm struggling to believe. And I can come up with a laundry list of reasons to not show up to church. And I'm a church every Sunday kind of gal, unless I'm sick or something. And it's because of the church, the people, right? Like, how many of us have church hurt? And, like, not just one instance of church hurt, but, like, repeated. We probably have church hurt from this church, if we're being honest, right? There is no perfect church. And when I think of all of that context and, like, my personal lens, and then going back to the original question of the church has a branding problem, like, I guess is it supposed to have a branding problem because we're this side of heaven and we're all being sanctified and we're all trying to figure things out, and, like, this is the point of what community is. These are things that I think about a lot. If you can't tell, I'm always asking a lot of questions and wrestling with these questions, and I probably am overthinking them. But the church having a branding problem is, I think, a lot more about how we treat one another as believers when we say that we're believers, not so much like the church has a branding problem as in, like, this building, right? Or that church down the street. I mean, they might have a branding problem, right? Depending on choices they've made. But that's a lot of what I think about. And I think about, okay, well, I'm a skeptic, but the greatest gift I've ever received is my salvation. How do I point people towards the best thing that's ever happened to me if what I'm revealing with my life and my words and my actions and my choices is not reflecting good news, right? Like, then I'm part of the branding problem. I'm contributing to it. And so I think a lot about that. And that's transformational in my thinking, because as I've matured in my faith, I've been able to point the finger back at me and be a lot more self-reflective of what is my role in the church's branding problem versus, I think, in my 20s and in my 30s, so spoiler alert, I'm in my 40s, right? I'm midlife. And when I was younger, with my church hurt, it was just, well, you did this thing to wrong me. It's your fault. And I would hold on to that hurt really deeply. And then I used it as a reason to not go to church or not to be involved or to not give, right? So the church having a branding problem, my perception of that has shifted as my faith has matured. But it's still very much present day an issue. And I think in this particular cultural moment that we're having, I'm not going to get into how I'm going to define that. You can probably guess, though.
All the things.
All the things. Maybe, I don't know, hot take, biggest branding problem we've had. I mean, I don't know. The church is, to many people that aren't Christians, see the church as this tool of the empire, or, right? And, like, there's this, like, really close affiliation. It's like, well, that was, like, where did this come from? This is not how it's supposed to be. And that has made it really difficult for me to like, I've had to really check myself in moments where I'm in conversations, it could be with clients, because I work with some clients who have very different views than I do. Like, if we're talking about political spectrum, like, way to the left of progressive. We do have shared values, though. We absolutely do. How those are expressed are different. And they're looking at the church in this political moment, and they're making comments about it. And I'm like, do I tell them I'm a believer? Like, I don't want them to lump me in with that group. And so I then become hyper aware of everything I'm doing every time I'm around them. So anyways, I could ramble on, but that's kind of where I'm coming from when I think of the church as a branding problem and how I've been reflecting on it.
Yeah, it's really good because thank you for sharing those thoughts, because it's helpful to gain different perspectives on this. And I think that's a part of the branding problem, in quotation marks, right? Of its perspective, right? From different people, because everybody has a different perspective of what they think Christianity should be or shouldn't be. And, you know, we growing up in 90s church were expected to have a certain style of faith where everything is put together. And there's like almost a perfection, like a legalistic perfectionism that's there. And there was no room for Thomas to ask to see the scars of Jesus. Like, the doubting is like it was like the Antichrist at that time, right? It was like, this is, you do not doubt these type of things. Like that passage of, I believe, but help me with my unbelief. Like, that's not even a prayer that people mention, because when you believe, it's like, we're fully in, there's no doubts, everything is perfect. And that's just not the faith journey that we see through the scriptures. Even the closest disciples of Jesus are the ones that betray him and deny him and walk away and go back to their old life of fishing, even after he's appeared to them behind closed doors, like in their fear, breathing the Holy Spirit in peace. And they're like, I'm going to go fishing the next day. Like, those are the type of people that he's pouring into, or Paul is writing letters to the church. And like, are you really celebrating a man and his stepmom, and you're like suing each other and making unbelievers look at you? Like, there's always been a quote unquote branding problem of the church. And I guess I bring all of that up to say, in your perspective, do you think that there are places where the branding problem isn't actually a branding problem? And do you think on the same, maybe the opposite side of that coin, where there is true branding problems for the church, like where we say, this is what Jesus said, this is what we believe, but then we're like, people come in and they're like, oh, this is the exact opposite. It's kind of like that Gandhi quote of like, I love the Christ of Christianity, but it's the Christians that don't look like the Christ at all. And are there pieces of that from your perspective that you're seeing as well? So kind of a two-part question there.
Okay, where do we go? I'm like, we could take this down so many different trails. Going back to the first question you asked, like, is it actually a branding problem? I would say, like, no, it's a discipleship problem, right? Like, the real problem is something else that's just like at a surface level presenting as a branding problem. It's much deeper than that, right? Because if we are living as we should, knowing the truth, that's the difference, right? If you don't know the truth, and you don't know the right way. If you live as though you know the truth and believe the truth, right? Because it's not, knowledge is not transformation.
Right.
Then we shouldn't have a branding problem, with maybe the exception of, but we're not perfect, right? Like, we're not Christ. And so we're in a state of constantly becoming that is sanctification. And if we acknowledge that in one another, then, and we are living as though we believe what we say we believe, then we'd also be showing one another a lot more love and grace, right? Like, but again, like, I'll point the finger back at myself as an immature believer returning to the Lord in my 20s, where I was just pointing fingers everywhere of how I had been wronged by the church, and I was using that as an excuse not to go back to church, right? Or to delay finding a church. That was my reality at the time. So, I don't know, it's not a direct answer to your question, but
so
in my experience using myself as an example, like, it's much deeper than a branding issue. Where I think maybe there is like a real branding issue, things that I think of when I think of that are, Christian nationalism, I'll just name it.
Sure.
But also, if you know anything about me, you will quickly come to know that I value authenticity and transparency very highly.
Yeah. Sure.
And I think that is where the church is missing the mark in many ways. And that, I see that as more connected to like a branding problem.
Sure.
We've had these conversations about this church of like, if we wanted to just grow by the masses, there's kind of a playbook for that, right? And without pointing the finger at any other churches, I'm not gonna even tell you what I think is in the playbook of like how we do that. But you can look at other churches around us that are very large, and it would be a feeling of like what their Sunday service is like, right? Without, again, not trying to blame or point fingers, but there's almost like a formula.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that is not authentic, right? And the other layer to this, when it comes to transparency, and this is really important for me as our treasurer on the board, is like, how do we make decisions? How do we decide where the money goes? How do we make not just what looks like wise choices on a surface level, but like, what does good stewardship look like? And how do we model that for the congregation? And how do we like be a mirror to them with that, right? And that's not easy. Like, there's really tough choices that we have to make as a church when it comes to our finances. But I don't know, like, it's just so important, right? To be transparent, to be authentic.
Sure.
I was telling Cam before we started recording today, there was a friend that came on Sunday that I had invited, like, I don't know, maybe sometime last year. Didn't ever expect to see them. And I'm walking in the door and here they come.
Oh, wow.
Did not know they were gonna be here.
Wow.
And I saw them a couple days ago and we spoke briefly about Sunday. And I said, we're kind of like an unimpressive church, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, that is a compliment coming from me. That is my intention behind that word. And they said, yeah, I loved how authentic it felt. And I said, I know exactly what you mean when you say that. Those are your words, not mine. And you can't say that enough about Christian churches. And I think that, like, then that's a branding. Like, that's a discipleship and other issues, but like, it's also a branding problem.
Yeah, totally. No, it's so good. And I think you're spot on in that assessment, because one of those challenges that is kind of like it's in between the lines of the New Testament is when Jesus is calling his disciples to not be hypocrites. He's really challenging them to, that word is tied to an actor who would wear a mask. A hypocritus is where you're getting that from in the Greek. And so he's telling people, like, if you want to be my disciple, you got to be authentic. Like, you need to take off the mask. And I think that is a huge answer to what you're talking about, of welcoming people, not just to become converts, not just to say a prayer, not just to kind of go through the Sunday Christianity, the checklist Christianity mentality, but to really, truly, authentically follow the Lamb wherever he goes, as Revelation 14 would say, right? Or, even to not just highlight the ooey gooey parts of the scriptures that feel good and look good and are great proof texts for us to argue whatever point we want, politically, economically, whatever it might be, but to say, no, like, I am yielded to the Lord, and I'm submitted to this process of becoming more and more like Jesus, which means there's a transformative piece there leading to authenticity. But no, it's really good.
Yeah, I think there's particularly, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm going to say I'm in your generation. We're in a generation, even though I'm maybe older than both of you.
We too were born in the 1900s.
Our generation and younger generations. I think this is something that we can't lose sight of, is authenticity and transparency and what they are looking for when they're looking for a faith community and a church. And more than programs, and programs aren't bad, right? Like, they can be really helpful tools for making disciples, but authenticity and transparency, like, gosh, let's not lose sight of how important that is, not just to attract a younger generation, but to point them right to Jesus. Like, that's what it's all about. That's what's so important. It's not about performing or looking a certain way, having a polished brand, right? Like if you're a corporation, you have a brand style guide so that everything looks and feels the same. The experience with the brand is the same. Well, if you apply that sort of thinking to a church, it's very performative, right?
Sure.
But like the reality is church is messy, and that's kind of what it is just going to be. And that authenticity, I think, is what is going to breed trust. And I think that trust is going to be what people say yes to, and then they meet Jesus in that place.
Yeah,
so
it's good.
I'm going to ask the hot question then. Either of you can answer this. Is the church as an institution still needed?
I hate the word institution. I'm just gonna say, it just sounds so gross, right? It sounds like businessy and I think of insurance and I don't know, things like that. Is the church needed in today's society? Absolutely. I mean, again, I sit on our board, so we have a responsibility to help govern the church and steward its resources. And I'll be honest, there are many aspects of a church that are kind of business-like.
Sure.
That is just the reality of having a building, right? Owning a building and needing to have insurance and needing to have a bank account and all of these things that are helpful tools, right? And making disciples and reaching people. But it's a tension that I feel. Yes, the church is needed. I think, to create institutions that protect themselves so that we can multiply to make more money and look really good. I think that is a model, and that is not what is needed, and that feels very institutional, and that's not what I'm interested in. I think it goes back to, what are people looking for right now? What are people aching for? And I think that's very much a relic of probably what we grew up in terms of experiencing the church. That I feel like commission is the opposite of, and that is something that keeps me coming back even as a skeptic.
Sure.
It's good.
It's good.
It's good. Cam? From the pastoral voice, is the church as an institution still needed?
It's a great question, and yes and no. I mean, I think in all honesty, the earliest formation that we saw of the church was gatherings of people in homes that lived in such a way that their gathering community for worship wasn't focused on the things that we're focused on, like you had mentioned, Kristen. And at the same time, the more opportunity that they had to reach people at different spaces and utilizing those pulpits or platforms or spaces, it led to more conversions and disciples as well. But I think there was a marrying of Christianity, as you said, with the empire or with the state, really under Constantine. And I would argue, and others would argue too, that the largest growth period for Christianity was in the first 300 years of it, when they didn't have buildings and they didn't have
insurance policies,
or senior, associate, executive, youth, kids. It was just they were communities of people doing life together, getting letters from Paul or whomever saying, hey, you should change your worship in this way so that it reveals Christ more to the people around you. And at the same time, it was so isolated in its spread at the time too, really in the Mediterranean world. Now we're talking about a global movement of people where resourcing is very limited in some of those spaces. And so I think there's a large benefit from having institutions that are able to send proceeds or give to places to do more development, to help reach more. And now missions organizations are doing things drastically different. As I've been meeting with leaders who are like, we're no longer just going in and, kind of like, woe are they, the least of these. It's like they interact with people on the ground level, grassroots, welcome them into the fold of the kingdom, train them, ordain them, and then have them really bring in the next group of indigenous people there, and they're forming now and sending out and multiplying. And it's less based off of, again, like a giant institution, but it needs still the funding or the backing from that to get it kick-started. But I would say largely we're seeing larger institutions really in the last 70 years, maybe 100 years with missions over the globe going towards that, trending towards that, finding more creative ways in which it can be less based around what has been the institutional way, and more based on what does it look like just village to village, house to house, person to person. Because the largest places of Christianity in the world, obviously we could look at the number of Christians who call themselves Christians in the States, and that's going to be one of the largest ones in the world. But the largest places of growth and exponential growth and sustainable growth have been outside of the States, outside of institutionalized buildings, and what we see here. And so, yes and no, I think.
This is reminding me, fun fact that is totally an aside, country that sends out the most missionaries annually, and it's not the United States.
What is it?
Guess.
China?
Actually, and we'll need to fact check this because I don't know if this is current as of 2026, but I believe it's South Korea.
South Korea. That's amazing.
That actually would not surprise me because I know a South Korean missionary. That makes a lot of sense. Does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. We'll fact check it.
One of the
But I'm pretty
largest,
sure.
the largest like member in terms of like member church in the world is in South Korea.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I think the other thing that comes to mind as you ask that question too is, post-pandemic, during the pandemic, people forget that in the States, the average size of a church is between 25 to 75 people.
Yep.
Like we're surrounded by mega churches.
Yeah.
We're surrounded. I could point in a direction 15,000. I could point in another direction 12,000. I could point in another direction 10,000. Like down the street over here, in the 20s. Like we're just surrounded by mega churches or surrounded by very large churches. But in America, the vast majority of them are 25 to 75 people.
Yep.
And I remember, as the pandemic is happening, shutdowns are happening. Those congregations that were smaller or older weren't utilizing cameras and online streaming. They were having to close their doors. Yeah. And I remember reading an article about an interview with Richard Dawkins at the time, who is one of the leading atheists of our day.
Yep.
Saying, I am simultaneously happy to see these institutions closing, but I'm really sad because of the services that are now lacking in that society.
Yeah. There it is.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing that the quote-unquote institution, but really the community of believers can offer to the world around us. If you were to Google food banks in Rancho Cucamonga, you'd get a list from AI generated, or you could find on the Rancho Cucamonga City Hall website a PDF that has 5 food banks in Rancho Cucamonga. All 5 of them are churches.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that says something about the group of people in our region. So I think that's noteworthy as well as we're talking about institution. And I guess that kind of leads into another question, Kristen, as you're thinking in church world, nonprofit world, all of the overlap that you have. In your opinion, as we're looking at and you made mention earlier too of like the moment in time that we find ourselves in, what would you say is the church's role in society?
Yeah. Building upon what you just shared, right? Take the real-time example of you look up food pantries in the city of Rancho Cucamonga. I don't know if maybe there are others that aren't churches, right? But like most of them are churches. It sounds like we can state that as a truth. That is the history of the church. And I think that what I find so interesting in this cultural moment is that many churches and believers have lost sight of that. Like, we are not a membership organization. We exist for the benefit of the community as well, right? Like, we should be on mission locally in all ways at all times. And what I want, maybe there's a study out there, I don't know. What I would find interesting is to look at the churches that in this cultural moment are, very anti-social justice or anti-helping nonprofits or anti-poverty efforts.
Sure.
And look at, well, what do your local missions look like? And what do your international missions look like? And I'm going to guess that you might place more emphasis on one than the other. I definitely have experienced that in some church contexts, if other folks have as well. And I just find that really fascinating because I think it says a lot more about what we believe versus like what the Bible tells us. I think that in this cultural moment, the church shouldn't forget the importance of its witness to those who are in need, right? Like, it's so funny. Before I returned to the Lord in my 20s, I would never have, I think I had a strong sense of justice in some ways, but I never would have thought of, like helping the vulnerable or, being charitable. I cared about causes, but I didn't necessarily equate it to what is my role and responsibility as a believer? Like, how does that connect to my faith? And when I returned to the Lord, I was attending this church in Orange County called Rock Harbor, still around. Mike Erie was the pastor. Shout out to Mike. Won't hear this, but it was a great, great teacher. And, without ever using the word social justice, it was definitely infused in a lot of the ways in which he taught on the gospel, which in that context was critically important because Rock Harbor sits within a very wealthy community with a congregation that is probably mostly very wealthy, right? Like, we're talking about people that are making way more than most of us are ever going to make. And that's not a criticism. It's just like that context is important. And what I was hearing as a young person, having just returned to the Lord, and hearing kind of this challenge that Mike would infuse in his teaching of the gospel was like, you are the 1%. Like, just the fact that you're sitting in a seat here, you are the 1% in the world. Because this was also during the time of like Wall Street, 1%, 99%, if anybody remembers that from history. But it was, you guys are actually the 1%. If you have a fridge, even if it's empty, you're the 1%. If you found a way, again, to get to this church service, right? Like, you're of the 1%. And there was something so challenging in that for me, as I identified as a very poor college student, that I was like, wait, I'm not in the 1%. Like, those are the people over there. But within the global context, it was very transformative and challenging in my thinking. And that led me to the Gospels, which led me deeper into my faith, which then led me into, okay, well, if I really believe this, then how am I living it? And then, so on and so forth, and, to where I am today, right? Obviously, your faith is a journey, but like, that is a part of what we're called to as believers. This idea that feels so foreign to me, or that I really struggle to understand, is this idea that like church exists for me to go to consume things. I get to consume a service. I get to hear worship that I like, and I get to hear a message that I agree with everything they said, right? And if I don't agree with it, then I'm leaving, I'm walking out, or I'll go to a different church, or whatever, or I'm not going to give you my money, right? Whatever the consequences of what I don't like and what I came to consume. And you exist to maintain my comfort. And like that is the role and the purpose of the church in many ways, I think, if we want to be honest. And this is like, I can't be self-righteous in this moment, because if I'm being honest, I like to receive and consume church too, you know? There are Sundays where if I was serving in kids ministry and I'm like, dang, I had a hard week. Like, I just want to sit and receive. It's like, no, I'm on the schedule. I made a commitment. I need to go, watch toddlers scream and run around for 90 minutes. And then like,
Honey Camp said thank
you. That's my role and responsibility too. And like, that is worship, right? Like, we also have, this could be a whole separate hot take of like, what is worship, right? Because it's not just singing songs. But yeah, like, I want to challenge the church in this cultural moment to revisit its witness and how is the community experiencing you? Because if you have no impact on the community, if you closed your doors and the community had no idea that you ever existed, then what are you doing? What are you there for, right? In this moment, Aaron and I were talking, but before we started recording, he works for a nonprofit. I work with a lot of nonprofits, and man, it's rough out there for nonprofits right now. And if you don't know anything about the nonprofit sector, here's a very quick primer. Nonprofits pretty much provide the basic community services that every community needs. Their primary funder is government, by the way, us as the taxpayers. And this has been the case since the Great Depression, right? I'm no nonprofit historian, but I know a little bit. So the church was the original service provider, right? Because it was a call to be the hands and feet of Jesus. This is how we live out our faith. So we were providing those services. Fast forward, the Great Depression happens. Oh shoot, we have a big problem. We have great need that we can't fill. Okay, well, the government public safety net comes in, right? We have things like Social Security, other things that, however you feel about them or not, are helping people that need help, right? Public safety net. Now government realizes, oh, we're not really good at providing services. Like, that's not why we exist, right? I think we can all probably agree the government's like not great at providing services, right? Like the DMV, bless our DMV workers, but sometimes not a great experience, okay? So the government says, okay, we're gonna give money to nonprofits because they're better at delivering these services than we are, and we accept that, right? And in this cultural moment, there's a lot of changes happening with how the government is choosing to fund or not fund nonprofits. And I'm telling you right now, it is going to have a significant impact on vulnerable people, families, children, and communities. Some of it is already being felt, but there's still a lot more to come. And you can be of the opinion that that's fine. I don't want my money going to the government to go to nonprofits to do that because it's not a faith-based nonprofit. Okay, fine. I'm not going to argue on that point. But then what are you doing as a believer? Are you tithing? Because if you call yourself a believer and you're a member of a church and you're not tithing, but then you don't want the government to help the vulnerable, then what are you doing? Do you believe?
Wow.
And I say that as a challenge and a call to action for the church. Because it should be about our witness is that important that we're compelled to respond, not only because we see people in need, but because this is what it means to be a disciple, right? And if that's not what you believe, then why? Why go to church? Just stay home on a Sunday. And again, I have to preach this to myself first and foremost. Because it's hard. Like, I don't know about you, but inflation is high and money is tight. And I would like to keep some extra dollars in my checking account, especially of late. Like, my kids need braces now. My dog is going to the vet like every other week, you guys. Like, it is getting expensive out here. I could use that money. And yet, it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do what he's called me to do with it. And I know that, thanks, Mike Erie, I'm in the 1%. So whatever I think is bad for me, I'm actually doing pretty good.
Yeah. It's so good.
And that, friends, is a practical take on the Great Commandments. Wondering how to love your neighbor? There you go.
There it is.
There's a bunch of easy, accessible options to loving your neighbor. Sometimes it starts with not even thinking about yourself. How can what's in my hand benefit the next person? Simple.
Come on.
Simple.
And if you're looking for something to do, you've got some resources to share, come to the Compassion Center.
Yes.
Shout out to Mike
There it
leading
is.
the Compassion Center that's doing incredible, incredible work.
Yeah.
If you're not already tithing, tithe. Not because we need your money, but because it helps your heart stay focused and tied to the Lord versus dependent on any earthly things, right? Like it really is, it is good for your soul to do that.
Right.
But hey, I also get like, you don't trust churches, you're concerned about that. All right, go volunteer at the Compassion Center.
Yeah.
Go show up with food donations. Go organize a food drive. Go do something.
Do something.
Do something.
Yeah.
Do something. I love it.
It's
Do
good.
something. What's your, I think that's a beautiful segue for our church take, because we as a church just started a series called Transformed, talking about some markers of transformation and places within our lives, I think our inner life, where we can find transformation. And what you talked about, a lot of those things are reflective when we're talking about being a disciple or follower of Jesus, are reflective of a transformed life, the transformed life of a disciple, right? What good is it for me to say that I follow Jesus, but my life looks the exact same afterward, right? Or people are questioning like, are you said you're a Christian, but you don't really, and we're not talking about the legalistic stuff, right? Like, well, you don't, I don't know, you don't drink, or you don't, no, just the real things that make for heart transformation, right? Are you more generous, right? Are you more compassionate? Do you look like if I read the scriptures, if I read just like you mentioned the gospel accounts, if I read the gospel accounts and I see the character of Jesus, do I see that reflected in you or in the people who claim that you follow him? This is what we talk about when we're talking about transformation. All that being said, to the man who kind of cooked up this series, Cam, what was the, I guess, the genesis of this series in your heart and mind? What was the seed for the series?
Yeah. Well, I was on a call with Andrea Vaudry, who preached the first sermon last week and did a fantastic job. Shout out to the sauce boss herself. And we were talking, and she was asking kind of the context of the series as she was prepping, and because she was kicking it off. And originally, we were in a series called Sing about the songs of the Bible, and then that was supposed to be 9 weeks, so it was supposed to run from July through August, and then we would run into the fall with we have a Revelation series coming up, which I can't wait for, and it's going to be amazing and hit on a lot of these things that we're talking about, actually. But in between that, I just had this like really big sense from the Lord on as we were moving into a new season of life. We've experienced some transition on our staff. We've experienced transition over the years. I just was sensing, as we're about ready to call our church into a new season of really focused intent on transformative discipleship through groups and through generosity and through gospel-grounded practices, or the 3 Gs. A piece of that, though, is we want to experience transformation ourselves. And so we wanted to preach through really what the gospel, the good news of Jesus, is about, his mission that he proclaims in Luke 4. He doesn't just say like, oh, the Spirit of the Lord is on me to preach kind of decent news to some people. He came to preach good news to the poor. He came to open blind eyes, to set captives free, to declare the year of the Lord's favor, which is a reference back to the year of Jubilee. It was a year of transformation. Slaves would be set free. Those who were indebted would be freed from their debts. There was a full transformation of identity that took place through that. And the gospel, I think, for a lot of people has become just this like, I'll say a prayer and one day I'll get there, rather than what the good news actually is, which is a proclamation that the King is here. Like the kingdom of heaven is drawn near, which changes everything. And Jesus shows us that through the Sermon on the Mount, right? You've heard it said, but I say unto you this way, think differently, live differently. Paul writes about thinking and living differently in every single one of his letters. The entirety of the New Testament is based around an idea of people being transformed from glory to glory into the image of Christ, because our sin broke that in ourselves. Right. And we need grace. We need gospel truth to set us free and liberate us and empower us now to become more and more like Jesus. And I think for a lot of people, there's this idea of like, oh, I'll never become like that. Like I'm just stuck. I'm stuck in the status quo. I'm stuck in my ways. I'm stuck in my mindset. I'm stuck in whatever temptation or pattern or addiction there is, or whatever it may be. And like, there's actually not a sense of freedom or hope or liberation for people. But the sense of the scripture is all things will be made new. And that's a process that God is doing now, not just that we also do have hope for eternally, but he's beginning that now. And so I really wanted to encourage our people to be focused on this sense of what the scriptural narrative invites us to join, the good news that there is a transformation we're invited into, to become more like Jesus, our head, our heart, our hands, and then also through community, through family. And I think you'd mentioned earlier, Kristen, that consumerism that's rampant in the church is a stark individualism, right? You could ask a person, hey, like they're church shopping or church hopping, and you're like, hey, how was the church that you went to? They're like, oh, the worship was fire, but the preacher, he's got a nose ring and tattoos. I don't really like his vibe, and like all it's just it's all about what I want and what I'm fixated on. And in the same way, people come in and they go, well, what is the experience that I'm having? What's the transformative thing that I have? Oh, I read this passage of scripture and this is what it meant to me. Rather than, no, you are baptized into Christ, is what Paul would write. You are brought into a family of believers that have now come together by the dividing barriers being broken down by the blood of the Lamb. And we are brought into a family where we not only pray in secret, we pray as a family. And we not only are transformed in the secret, but we are transformed as a family as well. And so that's a really huge piece of inspiration that led to this series of where we're at. And I'm hopeful it will inspire each one of us, myself included, to seek after the Lord's transformation individually and even more so with others as well.
It's good. That's good. Also, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about the ways in which the gospel has been preached differently from what it actually is. Right? You listed what Jesus said in Luke 4, which is him citing Isaiah 61. And those are very much like here and now things. Those aren't off in the sweet by and by. That's here right now, right? To proclaim liberty to the captives, that's right now. To preach the good news to the poor, right? Recovery of sight to the blind, and proclaim the year of Jubilee, as you mentioned, and liberty to those who are oppressed. That's right now. That's not, when I get to the other side, and it frustrates me, I guess, soapbox moment. Like, it frustrates me when I hear Christians say, man, I'm gonna make it in, but I might smell like smoke. Like, stop. Stop that. Stop that. It's not I'm gonna make it in, but I might smell like smoke. No, how are you being transformed? Because the only smoke that you should smell like is the refining fire of the Spirit transforming you into the image of Jesus. If that's the smoke you want to smell like, cool. Or maybe if you want to hang out by your Traeger, that's cool as well.
I'll smell like the incense. Does that smoke count?
The incense that are yes, the prayers of the saints, right? All those things, those are fine. Those are fine. But this idea of, well, the good news is just good enough for me to punch my ticket to the great party in the sky where the streets are made of or paved with gold. That is selling the gospel short.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of us selling the gospel short.
Yeah.
What does it look like for the gospel to truly be, as you mentioned, transformative in our lives, so that we're talking about the title of this podcast now, right? So that it's not just about the transformation, the salvation of our soul, the delivering of our soul from the damaging effects of sin, but also for the transformation of the world around us, right? It doesn't take just you saving the world. There's only one person who could do that. But by us just playing our part and allowing the transformative work, the authentic transformative work of the Lord in our lives, allowing that to spill over to the world around us. I think there's something powerful about that.
Yeah.
And so if you are tuning in now, whether if it's at a later date, check out the Transform series. I'll also keep this in mind. We're talking about transformation. The work of being a disciple is not just about us gathering and gaining information. Right? In the cultural moment that we live in, we have more access to more information than we ever had in human history. Right? At the click of our fingertips, right? You mentioned the fact-checking piece about missionaries, and I was about to just pull it up right here on my laptop. Right?
You could.
Right?
I could be wrong.
That, right? We could do it just like that.
Yeah.
But notice the word transformation and the word information both have the word formation in them. But one indicates just a receiving of something. The other indicates that thing changing them, right? Even the etymology of the word transformation, I was sent it to Cam yesterday, indicates or had spiritual implications at the beginning. So for us, it's not just about gaining a bunch of information. I think that's a lot of what discipleship has looked like, particularly in our American context for so long, is just gain all the information, memorize all the scriptures. Now, don't get me wrong. I think scripture memorization is phenomenal. But aside from just memorizing all the scriptures, memorizing the text, how is that text actually changing you? Right? How is it transforming you from the inside out? Or is it just more information for you to spout off? Because as it says in Proverbs, knowledge puffs up. It makes you give you a big head, okay? Yeah. But what good is a big head if it can't get out the door to go feed those around you and do good to your neighbors? So, tune in for the Transform series. Kristen, anything that comes to mind for you as you're hearing this?
So question for you both, if you're willing to go there. How are you being transformed right now or in this season?
Such a good question. Well, I think that marriage and parenting are two beautiful sanctification processes that God invites us into.
You said that so nicely.
And it's more so for my wife dealing with me, is her sanctification process. She's going through the refiner's fire there. No, I mean, jokes aside, like there's such a refining of how to love another person when you're just exhausted out of your mind or stressed out of your mind, or like right now I'm going through a family member is nearing the end of their life, and so I'm experiencing the waves of grief and past memories and missed moments and what that means for my sons. Or I think there's also these pieces where I am navigating, like in the midst of the toddler days that we're in. My 10-month-old is still round and perfect in every way, and that's a whole other thing. I hope he can sleep sometime soon. But no, it's like how do you stay patient, right? And I think it's really interesting that when Paul writes about love, the first way he describes it is patient. And then the first fruit of the Spirit is love. And I think that is something that I am being transformed in, is like a different understanding of long suffering as a form of love. And really bearing with another person in the midst of my wanting to react, or am I being triggered by something, or me wanting to parent the way that I was parented, and instead slowing down and allowing love to be a response, which I am growing in, and it's stretching me and hurts abominably, and like it's a transformation, though. It's a furnace, and I find myself praying those prayers of like, Lord, search me, know me, test me, see if there's any anxious ways or wicked ways in me, and lead me in your way everlasting. And that's a part of it, of like, what are those wicked, anxious ways? It's me wanting to just like react and respond, react out of flesh, react out of what happened to me or what I think needs to take place, rather than slowing and responding spirit-led. And so those are ways for me personally.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why? I hope so.
Thanks for. I appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity, because it's probably hard as a lead pastor to be like, "Here's my business," you know.
Totally.
But I think it's important that, I mean, this is part of what it means to live in community, right? Like, is to share. Well, here's how I'm being transformed. Here's how I'm not being transformed.
Yeah.
Because of my own sins that I'm not willing to give up, or because of this, and that. Not that you need to go there, but I appreciate you sharing.
Sure.
Well, he would actually. I'm kidding. I
have hatred in my heart
towards the Dodgers. Yes, we know.
Catch out the bag.
Intercessory prayer is still a thing for that. So yeah.
No, I would say when Paul says to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. If you're listening to this or watching this, do yourself a favor and look up the Diamond Gym in New Jersey. I think every morning my kids decide that they want to be members of the Diamond Gym and put me through it every single day to force me to work out my salvation with but the thing I would say for me is I'm being reminded, like in very real time, when the pressure's on, to literally practice what I preach, right? I could, mentor, disciple, preach, teach, do all those things. But when the pressure is on, when the refiner's fire is on hot, right? Am I actually going to put this thing into practice? That's where transformation happens, right? Is when you actually put this stuff into practice. So that's, I think, the real time for me right now is, you're actually going to do this. Passage that has been, I think, guiding me in this season is Psalm 85:7. Because I'm a person, naturally, I probably tend more towards like melancholy. So I'm more like, I have an inner Eeyore that's very real, and so every day is a fight for joy.
Were you goth? Because I was goth in high school.
I was not a goth.
You're present day goth.
I'm
in your
inner
soul.
goth.
He's just a Minnesota Vikings fan, so my brother.
I'm gonna get you some black eyeliner and a black cape, and I will let the internal come externally.
I can't just run into church like that. They might usher me out the building, or my father-in-law might think there's something wrong. It's part of our security team. No, so since I trend in that direction, one of my constant prayers is for the peace and the joy of the Lord to be at work in me. And so Psalm 85:7 says this, let me hear what God the Lord will speak. He will speak peace to his people, peace to his saints. But it doesn't stop there. It says, but don't let them turn back to folly. And so in those moments where, with the swirl and the busyness of my life right now, when I'm praying for peace, I'm like, okay, I think we're here. There's always that temptation to turn back to folly, to turn back to foolishness, to say something out of pocket, to say something. I'm quick with my tongue. So to say something that may make me feel good in the moment, but might be damaging to someone else, whether that be my children, whether that be maybe my wife, or that may be a congregant, whether that may be the students at the school that I work at, and the list goes on. Hearing the Lord speak peace and receiving that peace is one thing, but when the temptation to turn around and do the opposite is right there in front of me, I think that is where the transformative work is happening. Am I nailing it? Honestly, right now, if we're talking batting averages, I'm probably in a batting slump right now, okay, I'll be honest. But the more and more I sit and I reflect on those things, whether it's at the end of the day or in the morning of the next day, and allowing the Lord to still speak that peace and to rest in his love for me despite my shenanigans, I think that's where the transformative work is happening. Because just growing up, came from a space that was high honor. If you have a high honor culture, you also tend to have a high shame culture. And so living in that dynamic, there's had to be some shifting and reframing of my paradigm around God as a father for me and his love for me. So that's where I'm being transformed, Kristen. Thank you for that question, by the way.
I appreciate the honesty, friends. That's good.
Tonight was rich. And with the riches has to come the question, what are some takeaways? Takeaways. So whoever wants to start first, takeaways.
Information doesn't lead to transformation.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Cameron Sr.
Good Lord. Oh, man.
He might fight me off camera, I'm just telling you.
Or Abby, I don't know.
Man. Gosh, Kristen, you had so many good insights. I'm trying to rifle through them. And I think there's just a place, especially in the seat that I'm in and in the role that I'm in and in the stress that I feel connected to the place here and the building and the institution and the finances and all that stuff, and having concern about the branding of the church and really what that means is the witness of the church. I think there's just this place in me that's there should be I'm taking away of my pastoral heart should be, I want our people not to be so much focused on, our brand needs to be perfect, but more so I want our people to say, I want my heart to be right before God, because that's going to lead to the type of witness, the brand that needs to be seen. And I think that's the takeaway that I have right now of the branding problems that are out there, the things that we've discussed are well, actually that's not really a branding problem, that somebody has doubts, because that's A, in the Bible, and B, what a lot of people experience. So that's probably a good thing. More so it's the stuff of are we doing the opposite of what Jesus has called us to do? Or are we doing the things that Jesus has called us to do, but with the wrong heart motive? And can we get back to the right heart motive, I think is the takeaway. So what about for you, O?
It's two things you said separately, Kristen, but they synthesized in my brain as you were talking. When I asked you the question around institution and of the church, and you said, I don't really like that, but then you jumped into using the term community. But you also talked about how you yourself, as you've matured, it's no longer been about the finger pointing outward, but it's been about the inward inspection of self, right? And I think really that's part of who we are as the community of the church, is a community of those who are inspecting ourselves and reflecting on who we are and the ways in which we're being transformed before we are quick to point the finger at others. And so just that language around community versus institution was so helpful. And I think it would help if you're listening that you would take that to heart. And if you're someone who's saying, man, the church has just burned me, I get it. Church does it. But find yourself a community, and pray that would be a transformative experience for you as well. And also just hearing you talk freely, Christian, about doubt and skepticism. I think those have been almost just off limits, taboo words to even say in church. I think that's helpful as well. For us to be authentic about where we do have our areas of skepticism, or do have our areas of doubt, and at the same time taking steps of faith toward the Lord, and trusting that the Lord will meet us even in the midst of that, that He's not afraid of our doubts or our skepticism. He's not afraid of your doubts and your skepticism. He's not. Right? He's not looking and going, oof. That's a tough one for me today. No, the Lord's willing to meet you in all of those things. So, yeah, let's be a community of all those things and more.
Yeah.
Q&A, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. If you, again, for the new and uninitiated to this podcast experience, we have a live audience here. Yes. The faithful. That's what we'll call them, the faithful.
Wait, speaking of faithful, do you watch The Traitors?
The Traitors?
Okay, no. Does anybody watch The Traitors?
I watch The Traitors.
There's The Faithful and there's The Traitors.
I watch The Traitors by force, not by choice.
Okay. Does Renee watch?
My wife does watch it,
Okay.
and most of the time the show is watching her because she's asleep, and because I have a hard time just going to sleep, so I end up watching it. But yes, The Faithful and The Traitors.
Okay, all right, sorry. I guess I'll start the Q&A by saying,
So
do you watch The Traitors? Because that's when I hear Faithful
The
now, I think of
Judas
The
is in the
Faithful and
11.
The Traitors.
That's what it is. The Judas is in the 11. Yes, so we have the live audience here, and so feel free, anyone in the audience, to step to the mic. And also, if you're listening to this at a later date and you have any questions, whether it's about something that was said tonight or said in this episode, or something that you're just thinking about, please feel free. Shoot all of your questions to info@ccflive.org or DM us on any of our social media interweb outlets, or pay us a visit here at Commission Church. Cam would love to answer one of your questions right when he comes off the stage.
I would.
Right
It's the best opportunity.
It is
actually.
the best time ever.
I'm still caffeinated. Got the fire of the Holy Spirit.
Ooh, he might hug you and just hug you in the spirit. First question. If you push up, it should come on.
There you go. It's on.
You're on.
Oh, it's on. It was already pushed up, I guess. Okay, so first of all, thank you for your vulnerability. That's appreciated. You're authentic. Going back to trust, you mentioned that trust, Kristen. I would guess that's a big problem both in the church and with the government.
Yeah.
I've personally witnessed really bad spending with government entities. I worked for a community services program, an after-school program.
Yeah.
I watched them spend ridiculous amounts of money on stuff we didn't need, like hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
And you're thinking it could be better spent. I watched the school districts spend ridiculous amounts of money on stuff when COVID was ending because they were given that money.
Yep, the COVID
And
spend down.
the following couple of years, they couldn't buy construction paper. So a lot of misspending, which I'm sure people have experienced in the church too. So when you work with people, is that something that you address to help rebuild that trust, both with the government entities and with the nonprofits? Because it would seem that if we can find that space to build that trust again, there will always be people who don't want to give, but it would seem that more people would be willing to. And I'll give just a simple example of someone. There's a gentleman who is a forever, how do I say this nicely, asking for money in the parking lots. I've seen this guy doing this for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
At some point, you're questioning, dude,
Yeah.
are you really? Or is it just always you have a story? I experienced a guy one day shared a story with me about something. Next day, the story was completely different.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I struggle with that. This is always this battle. Like, is this person really needing my help? Are they not needing my help? Are they taking me for a ride? And that's something that really bothers me because I don't know if it's real.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I don't need to know. Maybe it's just I need to give. But I'm not giving out of a great giving heart because I feel stressed about it.
Yeah.
So it brings it back to that whole idea of trust. So is that something you work with people on to help them build that? Because I'll be honest, a lot of times I don't trust the government to do their job right.
Oh, I don't either.
I
think a lot of us would agree with you.
I don't, so I'm giving my money to you, I'm giving my tax money, and I understand these things need to be done, but how do we get to that place where we begin to build that trust again?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we could kind of tackle it in a few different ways. I work a lot with organizations on this kind of core concept of what does it mean to build and maintain trust, because it takes years, decades to build trust and seconds to lose it, right? Like it is something that I think a lot of organizations and maybe even us as people take for granted.
Yep.
And what I will often counsel and advise and coach on is you build trust through transparency. You build trust in the context of relationship. You build trust by doing what you said you were going to do, right? There are other factors that contribute to building trust, and it doesn't just happen overnight. So, if I'm working with a nonprofit, let's say, and we're addressing this question, there are specific things that I ask them about, like, well, what is your board governance like, right? Do you have transparent governance, or is your board just made up of family and friends who basically sign off on whatever you're going to do as the executive director, right? I'm saying, you're never going to hear me say, just give wherever someone says they have a need. No, wisdom, spirit-led due diligence, I am always all about. And when I'm working with clients, that's a lot of what I challenge them on. And, I'll challenge them on why are you making this assumption that just because of X, someone will want to give you Y, right? In the context of, you mentioned the individual in the parking lot, that resonates a lot with me. I don't tend to give to individuals in that situation. But what I've had to check my own self on in those situations is, well, is it more about me justifying because I don't feel comfortable? Or am I willing to be open and led by the Spirit in this moment and be obedient, even if that is, I'm called to do something in this moment? I'll give an example. And this is one example that I have. So I'm not trying to make myself good. Please know this. But I don't tend to give if I see someone panhandling. It makes me uncomfortable. Again, this is something that I am aware of, and I wish I was more Spirit-led and being obedient, but it's a struggle for me. There was a moment, I work a lot in LA, a lot of unhoused folks in LA. I was in a particular part of the city. I was with a client, and we were eating at a restaurant. We had gone out to lunch, and there was an unhoused individual that walked in, came right up to me while I was in line and said, "Can you give me money for food?" I wanted to say no for a variety of reasons. I felt uncomfortable. I wanted them to leave. I questioned, do you really need this? Even though, they didn't look like, your average person who just walked in and was trying to take advantage of me. They looked like they needed help. Something looked off. Yeah. And I paused in that moment, and I really did feel like the Holy Spirit told me, offer to buy them whatever they want on the menu and have them go first and treat them with dignity. I've never done this before. And I said, I'd be happy to buy you food. Do you want to order with me right now? And they looked startled because I don't think they expected that. I think what they maybe preferred was they would give them money and they would take off. But number one, who carries cash anyways these days, by the way? That was another factor in this situation. I had my debit card though. And they looked startled and they said, okay. And they spent a long time looking at the menu, trying to decide what they wanted. And they picked something, and I said, do you want anything else? Do you want a drink? Do you want da-da-da? And they said, no. And I said, okay. And so we ordered, and it got to, is it for here or to go? And I said, do you want to eat here? Is it, or do you want it to go? And they said, I would like to eat here. And I said, okay, it's for here. And that was it. I didn't talk to them after. The food, they called the number or whatever, and they picked up their food, and they sat somewhere else in the restaurant and ate. But I will tell you, the client that I went with was very uncomfortable with this situation. And I think the people that worked there were too. I have my theories on why that was. But I just remember in that moment realizing that I had done something different than I wouldn't have maybe normally done. And I believe it's because I chose to be obedient in that moment. And it was a good reminder for me of I need to be obedient. I need to be obedient and show this person dignity. And it's not about if I want to decide to question if they're actually needing money or not, right? And sometimes I do believe that we need to be willing to yield to the Spirit if the Spirit is telling you to give money, like whatever that might look like too. So yeah, I think it's like being willing to be obedient and be led by the Spirit, whatever the Spirit is calling you to do in that moment, even if you can justify why you shouldn't do it. In terms of, like, I'll take the church, right? So I'm the treasurer on the board of the church. I know our finances better than I ever thought I probably would, to be honest.
You're welcome.
I know the cash flow and the mortgage and all of the things. And I think being that close to finances has been, number one, very eye-opening, illuminating in many things. But the other thing that I think a lot about, because Cam knows this, is like, what does it mean to be good stewards of these resources that are entrusted to us? Number one, to bring honor and glory to God, because that is the paramount. But number two, I kind of tend to apply like nonprofit speak, because I can't help it, because that's my professional life that I live in, to the church of like, well, the congregation are the donors, right? In nonprofit context, we'd call them donors. Like, what do they expect, right? Like, where do they think this is going, and what does that look like? And so we talk a lot about transparency, and like the last annual meeting, I was like, oh, I can say all these things because I want to be transparent, and I want to tell them, like, money goes here and it goes here and it goes here, and it's like, actually people don't care that much. They're not as excited about it as you are. But then I'll always follow up and say, like, hey, if you want to know more, come talk to me, because this is important. I think that building trust, particularly, again, generationally, with people who've been hurt by the church, some of that stems from finances and how resources were used. Like, I don't want that to ever be a barrier to people encountering community or experiencing the Lord in this place. And so I'm just like, yeah, no, this is super important. Like, are we being good stewards? What should we be praying through that may look like it's a practical decision at the surface, but like, it doesn't matter if like we're not seeking wisdom in prayer about these resources, and how do we translate the complex financial information in a way that people feel like they can trust us. Like, that's really important, something I think about all of the time, because I connect it back to our witness, right? And if you feel like we're being authentic and transparent and you trust us, then like, hopefully that brings God glory, and like, that's the goal at the end of the day.
That's good.
Does that help? Did I ramble? I'm sorry. Okay.
That's good, Kristen.
That's a good question, though.
Yeah.
Next question. LOL.
Mom is laughing at daughter for technical difficulties right now. I love it.
She's like the only one I can glare at and not get like glared back. So firstly, I want to thank Kristen for being the first female voice on here.
Woo-hoo!
I definitely was
Hopefully
one
not
of
the
the
last,
people
guys.
that emailed a couple weeks ago and commented on the last podcast and was like, when are we having females?
Yes.
Not that you guys are not fantastic, but sometimes it's nice to have a female perspective on some of these big issues.
Amen.
A little bit of background context for the question. I grew up surrounded by an incredible community of people within the church, back when Commission Church was Cucamonga Christian Fellowship. It's all the same. But and one of the things that I appreciated about that is the community, where I had amazing youth leaders and grades leaders, and my parents also were really instrumental in creating creating this sense of community is not just church people, it's also people outside of the church. Fun fact, my dad created a kickball, I don't want to say competition, but like group of kids in our neighborhood, because we were homeschooled, we didn't have anything else better to do. And so my dad was like, hey, we're gonna go outside and go play kickball with the neighborhood kids. And it wasn't we weren't pushing Christ on them, we weren't pushing any of that narrative. It was just like, hey, I've got kids, you kids are the same age, let's go play kickball on the street. And while it did get a little bit competitive, there was that sense of, creating a community. And now having my own son, I want to be able to give that to him as well. Obviously, I come from the 1900s. So
Shout out to the 1900s.
What a time it was.
What a time to be alive.
Right? And I came from the view of the church of being the perfect Christian and having that perfect view. So I went through a bunch of stuff that we won't get into, and went through a transformation of that I've shared a little bit with Cam, and kind of changed that to be like, okay, well, I'm not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect Christian. So how do I represent that? How do I still show that I'm a Christian without portraying that perfect image, because that's unrealistic. So what are action steps that can an individual do to help keep Christ authentic in everyday life and community?
That's really good.
You want that, senior?
Yes. I can't wait for this podcast to be over so we can fight in the parking lot. I'm kidding.
Holy hands, holy hands.
That's how you can be authentic in Christ.
The name of
I'm
our
going
fight
to lay
club.
some hands on my brother. No, I think there's you mentioned something really unique where when we mention the word community,
There it is.
there is a difference between Christian community and community. And what I mean by that is I don't look at people outside of the church and expect them to live like people inside of the church. Actually, that's what Paul would write in Romans and in Corinthians. My goal is not to look at unbelievers and say, you need to act like believers. That doesn't make any sense. They need to come to Christ in order to understand what those morals and values and all of that transformative process looks like. I'm not looking for that. And I'm not looking to receive things in community that I would receive in Christian community as well. And I'm not having the expectation for that. Interestingly, I find a lot of Christian community morals found in places of community and actually lacking in Christian community, ironically, as I'm bringing my son into different spaces. But it's because I have a Christian viewpoint that I'm seeing those things and I'm naming them, and I'm also able to teach him and disciple him in that. But I think that's a huge distinction that we've got to have. I think that there's a reality that when we're entering into those places of community and Christian community, I think there was a concept that was used in the early 2000s of a form of evangelism in the emerging church where you would almost pretend not to be a Christian, and then people would be surprised when they found out you were a Christian.
Surprise!
Which is just the dumbest form of evangelism I could think of, because it's completely inauthentic. It's completely disingenuous of who somebody is and what we actually believe, because if we are claiming to be a Christian, Christ is the center part of our existence and our life. Our world revolves around him. He is the center of all things, and in him and through him and for him, all things are created and sustained. And so I think there's just this place where we have got to be able to walk in, I am walking with the Lord in all of those places wherever I am at in my life, and being able to openly show other people sometimes I walk in that great, and sometimes I miss the mark, and whether I am doing it well or not doing it well, his grace is sustaining me in all of those things. And I think that's the foundation that we live in. But I think there's a place almost where the biggest thing that we've got to ask ourselves on a daily basis that I think will inspire us and actually show us the actions that we need to be aware of or need to implement or need to withhold from is asking ourselves, why am I saying that? Or like, why am I engaging in that way? Or am I saying this to appear a certain way? Do I want to appear, stereotypically Christian, or do I want to appear holier than thou, or do I want to appear like nonchalant Christian so that it's not, I'm not like, I think you made the phrase like, we're not forcing Jesus on them. I don't feel like I'm forcing Jesus on people when they ask me what I do for a living and I tell them I'm a pastor. Yep. Even though for some people, they feel like I'm forcing Jesus on them. I'm like, you asked the question. This is on you. And so I think there's just that reality though of we've got to be able to come to grips with, why am I doing things? Why am I saying things? Why am I interacting with people in the way that I'm interacting? And coming to grips with that, I think, causes us to become more and more aware of maybe where we're being inauthentic or not genuine in those spaces. And then I also think it's really important to name what we're expecting as we're entering into community and Christian community. But that's just my immediate thoughts on that.
I'm going to throw like a 30-second 2 cents on this. I think our posture matters. Yeah. And so, like you mentioned, like growing up as a Christian in the 1900s, the late 1900s, we operated from this place of like perfection, right? And so it's almost as if we have the moral high ground. Mm-hmm. And so I'm operating from a place of high ground. And so because of that, if I have any sort of so-called deficiency in my life, I can't even show that. Mm-hmm. And so that weight and that performance, the effort it takes to keep up that performance is exhausting, right? Which then entails I will not lean upon the power of the Spirit, the sufficiency of the grace of God for me to live out exactly how I should, right? And so I think us just going into our lives and not living from the posture of I'm up here and I have to do these things, but rather I am a human who is not perfect, but being perfected day by day, and allow people to see, if we're talking about this like, I guess a piece of art, like, or even just, since I have a fat kid living on the inside, like a dish, right? When my kids come into the kitchen and see me cooking, they're like, Dad, what is that? And I'm like, don't worry, like it's not done yet. Don't worry, it's not done yet. And then when it's done, they're like, oh, this is good, right? It's the same way with the way in which we live as disciples of Jesus. That it may look a little funky, right? When I'm throwing those eggs in, the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients together, it looks a little funky. But once that thing is baked and once you're smelling that in the house, you're like, oh, that's good. And we have to be willing to invite people into seeing our process. And I think the process is what blesses the world around us, instead of us trying to present an easy bake oven version that's not even the real deal.
Wow.
True. I'm going to add something to this as a woman.
Yes.
There's another layer to this as a woman in church. So I mentioned earlier, I identify very much as an outsider. And I think for most of my life, I've been trying to find spaces where I belong. If this resonates with anyone, including in the church, like primarily in the church. And as a woman who's a believer, I think there's there are expectations of what this looks like, and how you speak and how you dress and how you present and how you show up and the things that you do and the ways that you serve, so on and so forth. And none of that has ever felt like me. And I have always felt this tension of, I want to belong as me and who God made me to be, knowing that I'm being sanctified, right? Just because, like, accept me for who I am, but I'm never going to change. I don't mean that sort of like acceptance, right? But like I have, it's been one of my biggest sources of pain in coming to church, and one of the reasons that I identify so much as somebody who comes to church every Sunday with one foot in the door and one foot out the door. And I think as I've matured in my faith, and this is like very recent, to be honest, in the last several years that has overlapped with coming to commission, is just feeling this, like finding my confidence in my identity, and like really trusting that like God has made me this way for a reason, so that others can feel like they don't need to conform to belong, right? Because conformity is not belonging. And I think that in Christian churches, particularly in the 1900s Christian church context, it was like you had to speak a certain way and look a certain way if you were really a believer. And I will tell you, one of the things that like this can be another hot take for another time if you ever invite me back. I hate speaking Christianese. I don't speak Christianese. If you know what Christianese is, it is like the layered jargony language that believers use. And I really don't like speaking it. And so you'll, like, sometimes even sitting here tonight, I'm like, saying certain things makes me a little cringy because I feel like I'm teetering on the edge of Christianese. I want to speak normally so that someone who isn't a believer would understand what I'm saying, but I feel like I have to code switch in order for people to like believe and trust that I'm a believer. And I think that's a tension that's probably just always going to exist, and I've kind of come to accept that. But there are other things that my perspective and my perspective has changed as I've really just reminded who I am in the Lord, and that if he's calling, he made me this way for a reason. He wants me to show up that way within the church, and that might bring others into the church that felt like they didn't belong in the church. And that actually is what kind of encourages me the most and has given me this confidence of like, I don't care if so-and-so doesn't want to be my friend. I want to be friends with everybody, by the way. So if you need a friend, come find me. But I'm not down for cliques, and I'm not down for I can only fit in with this women's group if I do these certain things, which, by the way, happened to me in a previous church context. And it was like, all right, so I don't belong here. I'll go create my own table and invite other people to it, because isn't that what the church is supposed to be anyways? So, by the way, shout out to Christina, because I shared some of this in our women's Bible study before. And I think even sharing it within that context helped other women in our group be like, oh, I feel that way too. I just didn't know that you ever, I didn't know you felt that way. And it's like, yeah, I feel like this way all the time, if I'm being honest. So, I think that it goes back to that vulnerability, and there are people that are going to be drawn to the Lord by you being authentically you. And I don't mean be who you are and do what you want sort of thing. I don't mean in that way, right?
Yeah.
So,
love it. Told y'all, he's money. I think we have time for one more, if we have one more. Okay, uno más. Let's run it. Check. You wrote it down too.
There are so many questions I have, but I'll just ask, trying to unite both sides of the brain. Can you paint me a picture with all the hope of the transformative work of Christ, of what the church could look like, but as practically as possible, in our society? We were talking about the role that the church plays in society. And so be as impassioned as you want to be in that description, but if I can't walk away knowing that I could do that, the practical way of how I'd put my feet to the ground to go do that, that's going to be a problem for me. So be as impassioned as you want, but as practical as you can be.
That's a great question.
Jeez, that's a question that's worth a whole episode.
The dudes are thinking deep thoughts.
Yeah.
While they're thinking and formulating, I'll share something that I think about often. In this cultural moment, given what we do here at Commission and what is happening right now, particularly with nonprofits that, again, provide a lot of these services that communities depend on. If you need something very practical that you can act on tomorrow, call Mike, who is the Compassion Center director. He needs volunteers. We need more volunteers to do a variety of things. But for those of you that don't know what the Compassion Center is, it's a drive-up weekly food pantry. It's no barrier, which means anyone can show up and they will receive food, which, by the way, I think is the right model that everyone should have, but that's besides the point. Additionally, what I've been talking with Mike about were, there's so much more that we can do. There's so much more that we can do in this moment. There's a lot of families, seniors, folks that are struggling financially, right? Inflation's high. There's a lot of economic insecurity in many ways. There's funding cuts. There's a lot going on. And yes, we want to provide them with food so they're not hungry. Like, I feel like that's a basic call in the scriptures, right? That hopefully no one would want to contest. And yet we don't want to stop there, right? Like, why do we have families who you can have 2 adults working full-time jobs and still not have enough food? Like, that's a reality in our community. How is that even possible present day? Like, how did we get to this point? We as believers, I think, should be looking beyond just the basic of like providing you with food, and how is it getting to this point in the first place? Like, what other conditions are going on, right, with our government, with our churches, within our society that is creating this problem? Because there's a lot more that we can and should be doing as believers to change those conditions. Like, I'm not a person who believes that the church should just maintain a role of charity. I think that's the baseline. I think that there are unjust systems, right, that exist that we could have a whole separate podcast conversation on, that we should be challenging as believers. We should be holding government accountable, because government doesn't always do things well and spend money well. We should be holding them accountable. We should be, as Christians, going to Sacramento and challenging the governor to say, does your budget reflect the possibility that families could be hungry even if both parents are working full time, right? Like, how is this possible today? I think that there's so much more that we could do, but where we can start with the Compassion Center, talk to Mike. Mike, I'm here, what can I do to help you? What's your greatest need right now? And Mike will tell you what it is. Or it could be, hey, I've got some free time. Like, do you need someone to go around and talk to the businesses around here and see if they'd be willing to do food drives around Thanksgiving? Like, I could do that. I can make flyers. There's a lot of things that Mike would probably say yes to, that the idea doesn't have to come from him. It can come from you if you kind of just start with, like, tell me what the need is. What do you see here? And what's your bigger vision for how we can reach more people and point them to Jesus and also meet their practical needs? You can do that starting tomorrow. And oh my goodness, where could that be a year from now, right? Just by you saying, yes, like, here I am, Lord, send me, right? What can I do? And I think if all of us were willing to do some form of that within our own sphere of influence or the resources and the talents that we had, I mean, that is evangelism. Like, how much more would people be willing to maybe come in through these doors and experience the truth of the gospel if they were encountering Christians in that way? But for some reason, we think that, like, for missions, we need to go to Africa, which, by the way, we can. I'm not going to say we can't do that, but we have this strange mentality that, again, I think is 1900s, Christian church. That's like, oh, like, missions is this and outreach is this. It's got to look this way. And I just love the idea of challenging that status quo and those kind of assumptions we have, and seeing ourselves and, like, what's the bigger picture here? Like, how can we move beyond, right? It can start with the food pantry, but there's so much more that is needed that you could do that could be incredibly transformational and point people towards the Lord.
It's good. Cam?
Man, it's such a good question, Josh, and I'm just reminded of a poem that you and I both have been formed by. The vision is Jesus, obsessively, undeniably, contagiously Jesus. And when people encounter the vision of Jesus, like the early church day of Pentecost, they say, this message has cut us to the heart. What do we do? Repent and be baptized. And there's a reason why that message cut, though, is because there's such a transformative experience that Peter had just had of going from denial to being restored and being redeemed and experiencing saving grace. And it's such a beautiful thing because it was just like they risked it all. Like they risked it all in Roman invaded territory. They risked it all to say, let's look like fools. Let's look like the people who believe in the resurrection. Let's wake up early and sing hymns to Christ. Let's go and bring all of the possessions we have to the apostles, and then they're going to distribute them so that nobody's in need. Let's be the people who win favor among our neighbors in such a way that every day somebody was added who was being saved. Like, I think the hope that I have is that there's, I think as we look at church awakenings throughout like revival history, there's been markers of God moving in that, and I think there's really beautiful instances of how that's happened in stadiums or in large places, but also connected to those movements, like at the Billy Graham Crusades. The people who ran those events are also dumbfounded because 80% of the people who made decisions, they don't know where they're at.
Yep.
And I'm hopeful that there is a day coming that's going to look like the day of Pentecost, but for our age, where the multitudes will come to a beautiful vision of who Jesus actually is. And it's going to cut to hearts, and it's going to lead to transformative experiences and transformative lifestyles that not only engage in their personal walk with the Lord, but in the way in which they want to see their family and their neighbors and their communities and the society as a whole experiencing that saving grace as well. I think of stories of pastors who have left mega churches to go and do house by house, apartment floor by apartment floor style of evangelism and church gathering. And I wonder what the Lord is wanting to do in calling the church in our context towards that type of lifestyle. I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. This is actually a question I think about almost daily. Like, what could the church look like? I think for all of the faults and failures that we may see with, quote unquote, the institution of the church, whatever, the thing that I'm constantly reminded of is I'm a part of the church.
Yeah.
So if the church is described as the bride of Christ, I will either be a part of throwing more tomatoes at the white dress or helping clean up the stains.
That's good.
And so the first thing I think of is part of cleaning up the stains is getting me right, right? Is what does it look like for me to be a person of repentance day in and day out? And then in light of that, to be a person who goes and helps heal the brokenness in the world around me, right? Term is shalom. And what does shalom look like? I think for me practically, hands-on, is what are the urgent needs I can meet right now, right? I think Paul says it's either in Titus or Thessalonians, for people to be ready to meet urgent needs. And so one of the piece of advice I always give people, especially younger folk who are like, yeah, I'm on fire for God, I want to go do stuff. Go find like what the biggest need in your church is and jump right in.
Yeah.
Just jump right in. You don't need a platform. You don't need a microphone to do that. You just need to be present. Yeah. Presence matters. And so sometimes that biggest need might just be greeting people at the door. Like Kristen mentioned for us here, like the Compassion Center, we have tremendous opportunity through that. And so whatever it looks like, to first allow the Lord to heal the brokenness that's in me, and then in turn to go out and be someone who does that for the world around me is massive. And so I would just throw this encouragement as well. For those who are looking at the church and saying all hope is lost, I do not believe all hope is lost.
Yeah.
It's not. Because the one who, number one, Jesus is still on the throne. Allow me to preach for a second. He's still on the throne, okay? That tomb is still empty, okay? Death is still defeated. And with all of that, you may say, that sounds like great stuff, whatever. With all of that, that means that hopelessness is not our portion.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And this isn't religious psychosis or some sort of denial. It's just where I stand. In the midst of, I actually trend towards where you do, Kristen. Like, I do trend towards skeptic. I do. But in the midst of all of that, there's an undeniable, like you said, Cam, that beauty and that vision of Jesus, right? The painting of Jesus may have been smeared. Jesus may have been presented in such a wrong way to a generation. But what does it look like for us through our lives to be those jars of clay, like Paul talked about, through whom the glorious gift of the light of the glory of Jesus is presented to the world around us.
Yeah.
I don't think we have an issue with belief. I think we just have an issue with beauty. We haven't beheld the beauty of Jesus, or just beauty in our lives in general. Hope that made sense. Hope that was helpful. But that's where I land with all of it.
That's good.
And I think that's a great place to call time on another episode of the Soul and Society podcast, brought to you by a sponsor to be named at a later date. As always, I am your host, Osahan. Our guest, Kristen, will be finding us some sponsors in Jesus' name.
Guido's Pizza.
Oh, Guido's
Among
Pizza.
amazing.
Shout out to them.
Can you also reach out to Ghost Energy Drink?
Ghost Energy Drink. I'm telling you, extra dose of the ghost. We're here for you. As always, if you want to find us on the interwebs, a place that I don't like venturing onto, but I will be as soon as this episode is over. Cam, where can they find us?
Commissionchurches.org, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, and that's
LinkedIn? No LinkedIn?
No LinkedIn.
No LinkedIn yet.
No.
Are you consulting us now to get a LinkedIn?
No, because then you'd be acting like an institution. So maybe we stay
Bang.
off
There
LinkedIn.
we go.
I'll take down our Commission Church LinkedIn page.
LOL. With the AI photo of yourself, finally filtered.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And so grateful for all of you who've tuned in, whether you are tuning in right after this dropped or at a later date. And as always, my favorite question, if you're wondering what it looks like to love your neighbor, just do what Jesus said. Love everyone. Grace and peace.